came prepared.
Yeah.
And there was one time that I had search and rescue come and pick me
Oh, wow.
because
Was that in Lynn
I
County?
hadn't, no, that was Benton County. We lived up at the top of it.
Yeah.
And there was one time that I had search and rescue come down to the bottom.
Oh, wow.
Because
Was that in Lynn
I
County?
had,
Yeah, well,
no, that
they
was
walk
Benton County.
That's my
down
zoo.
there. It was probably
Bigger.
Yeah.
And there was one time that I had search and
can't-
rescue come down to the bottom.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but it was kind of hard.
Was that in Lynn
I
County?
had,
Yeah, well,
no,
they
that was
walk
Benton County.
That's my
down there.
zoo.
It was probably
Bigger.
Yeah.
And there was one time that I had search and rescue
Okay.
come down to the bottom.
Okay, how do
Yeah,
we?
search, it was kind of hard.
Was that in Lynn
I had,
Yeah,
well, no, that's
walk
Benton County.
That's my
down
zoo.
there. It was probably
Bigger.
Yeah.
And there was one time that I had search and rescue come down to the bottom.
Okay, how do
Yeah, search, it was kind of hard. I had, well, no, that's Benton County.
That's my zoo.
We won't. Heather Lehman, will you turn the mic on then for?
That would be easier for me. Thank you very much. On the screen.
Aha.
Move the nameplates around.
I did, I got it,
Oh,
I think.
Well,
let's see how I can play Tetris.
thank you. Can you do it?
I hope so.
Yeah, it's a little tight. It's like parking places. You get tighter and tighter.
Now, if I break anything, I'll pay for it.
Oh,
Promise.
Be in debt for life.
don't break yourself. That's the biggest thing.
Well, I have good insurance. God, it's like having a second brain.
Haven't started yet. Sammy hasn't gotten us all out of control.
Tammy J moved in. These
Oh, I
packets.
got one.
Oh,
Well, you do have one? I do. I printed it off and you didn't change it, did you?
didn't.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I need an agenda.
Oh, well,
Okay,
there you
there we
go.
go. Yeah, I did it,
This packet slowed down.
and nothing broke.
Good job.
Well, I tried.
That's okay. At least you're the right person.
Well, Counselor Lehman moved things around.
That good?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Sammy, you tell me when.
Adam, what time do you have? Perfect.
Call the city council work session to order at 6:02. Sammy, would you do roll call, please?
Yes, we have Mayor Bell,
Here.
Counselor Bauman,
Here,
Counselor Engelbretson. Here. Counselor Lehman,
Here.
Counselor Myers,
Here.
Counselor Smith,
Here.
Counselor Wells. And there is a quorum.
Thank you very much. So this work session will be as is printed on the agenda, an orientation and a review to provide an understanding of the role of the counselor as a council as a body, the functions of city government, the responsibilities of its elected officials, and key city resources. So that's our topics for tonight. I will tell you that Adam and I spent the most of the day up at the Capitol today, at the League of Oregon Cities, City Day at the Capitol. And that was very enlightening. It's really good to know that we're not the only ones that are struggling financially. that everybody has concerns. The governor spoke to us and several of our legislators spoke to us and it was enlightening. And it's, again, I guess I just always like to know we're not the only ones out in the boat and rowing hard. So we have a lot of work ahead of us. I'm looking forward to the retreat on the weekend. Will y'all be able to come on the weekend?
Yes,
I will not.
You won't.
I am testing for the Springfield Police Department that day.
Okay, so, all right. So I think we'll still be okay. Quorum wise.
I believe we will have a quorum. It looks like we will have 4 of the 6. Yeah. Oh,
Well, it's nice to have as many of us as possible there for sure. And it is always nice to know if we have a quorum or we can sometimes adjust what we discuss.
We may consider, Mayor, as important as that meeting is looking at some of those other dates or
Right.
some different availability. Maybe we could discuss it at tomorrow's agenda meeting.
Okay, all right. And with that, those of you that are here and present, would a different date work if we can come up with a different date?
speaking for myself, depends on the date.
It does. Okay,
If it's a Saturday, I won't be here the 3rd Saturday in February, but I would.
okay. Well, we'll look at some dates and get those out to you and see.
So should we keep this Saturday penciled in?
Keep it penciled in and
Okay.
we'll look at some other dates.
Yeah,
Yeah.
as Sammy said, I think, quorum is one thing, but this kind of a session
It's
is really a good one to have everybody there because there's a whole lot of background, a whole lot of stuff that I gain, in making sure we're aligning what we're doing in our, our regular work as well as our big project work, that we're all on the same page. And we get it, I enjoy it. We're talking about really long range stuff that is sometimes hard to do in our business meetings and even work sessions. So, my selfish thing would be trying to find a time where we get all 7 of you, but I know that's really hard on a Saturdays. We could split it up and looking at, 2 4-hour sessions. I think there's something beneficial about kind of that longer thing, but also that can be problematic for people. So wide open, it's not at all a staff driven thing. It's really a council group driven thing that I think is really important, sets the tone for our budget, sets the tone for really our work planning. We have a bit of a head start and we'll go through some of it tonight with the framework from last year. Because as we talked about, that wasn't a 1-year framework. It was a multi-year framework. So we're not starting from scratch, but my plug is it'd be awesome to have everybody if we could.
Yes.
If we know we're gonna have 2 absences, I think we should just decide now, your schedule. That allows us to plan that Saturday for other things.
Right.
If we know we're not gonna have it.
I agree.
Yeah. I don't know if Councilor Engelbretson,
What do
gonna
you
be-
think, Councilor Ingebretson?
Yeah, I think I can do a different Saturday. It would be nice to be able to pull Counselor Wells. Also, is he not? I can't see him if he's there.
He is not here and he will not be back in the country until March, I believe.
Ooh,
Yeah, so
And that would be too long.
he'll be out. We'll be into budget season then.
yeah, I mean, it's pushing it. I mean, the preference is to have it earlier to prep because then we actually bring it forward to a council business meeting to kind of adopt whatever adjustments or modifications we make. And, that means that if we do one in March, that's the April meeting, but
We go with 6, if we get 6 confirmed, night to schedule it sometime in January or in February, on a Saturday.
I mean, I can do a week from Saturday, so what would,
that would be the 8th.
I could do the 8th as well. The other 2 are.
And I believe that is out for me.
Okay, February 15th.
Yeah.
Good with
Let's poll tomorrow and just cancel for this Saturday.
If you're all are comfortable with that, and then we'll find a slot
Okay.
that works,
When
that
you
gets
say
more
poll
people.
Tomorrow, is there a meeting tomorrow? That involves us? Let's just agree upon who's here that can, what Saturday you can do, and then you can decide in your meeting tomorrow.
I will,
I can do 8th, 15th or 22nd.
all those dates work
You
for me
can't
as
do-
far as I know.
Let's,
Twenty-
All three of those work for me.
I could be back for the 22nd then.
It's sounding like the 22nd works the best
Yeah.
from around the horn.
Yeah.
We'll miss Counselor Wells, but I think like we say, we probably will regardless.
He will be
Yeah,
out for a
but we
while.
get the rest and
Is everything all right with?
Oh,
him?
yeah, he's out sailing the Caribbean.
Oh, lucky him.
So
I think-
I'm going to go out on a limb and say everything is all right.
right.
Sounds lovely to me.
Unless he has a castaway sort of,
And I don't think so. So the 22nd
yeah.
sounds reasonable for all of us in the room. And you, Counselor Engebretson, does that work for you? Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
All right, well, we'll look at 9 to 4, or if we get finished early, we get a get out of jail card.
Yeah.
And I suppose I should just let everybody know up front, since it does affect the group. Somebody will probably have to pop in and check on me because I take medications at certain times, and obviously I'll need help with lunch. So somebody will have to, just so you all are aware of that, somebody will
Good.
have to,
That sounds perfectly acceptable.
yeah. Just wanted everybody to be aware.
Thank you for that. Okay, February 22nd, it is. Yay.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Good suggestion, Counselor Lehman. Get it set up tonight rather than
And that's
Keep
from
around.
9 to what?
4. Plan on 9 to 4.
Okay.
Sometimes we finish a little early, but not too much too early. Is there
Yeah.
a game that day?
No, I don't think so. I was checking. No, I think we finished like 3:15, 3:30 last year.
we
Yeah.
weren't- we weren't
We'll just,
following.
yeah, we don't need to stay just cause if we're finishing up, we're finishing up.
All right. Well, thank you all. And now, who am I turning it over to?
Yeah, we're gonna kind of tag team. Sammy's taking the lead on most of the organization of this and cutting off a bunch of stuff that we were contemplating trying to do in the retreat. And I think that was part of our idea of this work session was to handle a lot of this so it frees up the retreat for some other things. This is super important framework, foundational stuff, but we can then do the creative stuff on the retreat.
Just a second here. I'm gonna. Kathy, you have a copy of the charter at the house. I may get it up on the screen, but so everybody welcome tonight. Elected officials in the city of Coburg must fulfill a variety of functions and have many commitments. These duties are governed by legal, ethical, fiduciary, and procedural regulations and guidelines beginning immediately upon taking office. So we have one new counselor. We always try to schedule a orientation with counselors. We've been doing that, I think, for about 5 years. Current projects, current just guiding documents, do a tour of the city and some other stuff. We thought maybe it would be a good idea to have a larger look at a little bit of a refresher for everybody. As we welcome Donnie, we will still be doing a hybrid with him for a tour and stuff later, but we're just going to go over tonight some of the processes and some of the stuff that's specifically Coburg or specific to the city of Coburg. So you should each have a copy of the city charter that's in front of you. Most of you guys are familiar with it. There's a notebook. And then also you'll have a thumb drive I will get you one, Kathy. I believe you already have it, but it's a League of Oregon City thumb drive that includes several different trainings and resources. It's from 2023. There's been a couple of the items on there that have been updated. But it talks about a lot of the statutory stuff, executive sessions. It's a great resource to go to if you have any questions in the procedures or a certain item. We've also added to that thumb drive a copy of all of the documents that we're going to discuss tonight, which include the 2022 city charter, our comprehensive land use plan, the zoning code, parks master plan, your water master plan, the 2024 objective and framework document that came out of last year's retreat, and then some maps and other documents. Those are all available on the website, of course. But this way they're in one little location for you. There's also printed copies by the back door if you prefer to have them that way.
Think we can get all of that stuff on one little drive.
League of Oregon Cities has some great resources as well.
Yes,
They do great work simplifying some of the more technical aspects.
Sure. Amazing.
Kathy, let me know if you have problems hearing me. I have to hold my mic down, so.
I can hear you fine. Thank you.
Okay, good. So we'll start with a little history and fun facts on the city of Coburg. In 1893, Oregon House Bill 265 passed the town of Coburg as officially being recognized by the state. It's a pretty fun document. To look at what that meant is that the city had to have certain officers. It didn't have a council at that time, but had to have certain positions. One of them was a marshal, and a treasurer was another one. Also required that the city had a city seal, and the city seal is something that we still use. It was not the town of Coburg. We used the city of Coburg seal, which probably came in 1906, and I have a feeling it's the same original piece. Heavy seal. So in 1906, our first mayor, George Drury, was elected. And the city charter was also set up in that time during an incorporation that was set up in state statute. So in order to change that city's charter, since 1906, you had to adopt new charters. That's been done 7 times since 1906, and we're now on our 2022 charter, which is what I like to think of as the constitution for the city, kind of lays out our rules and guidelines that are different.
We have a council in 1906.
We did. And that is actually in the document. Which-
Still have minutes from that meeting?
No, probably not.
No, but we do have some that go way far back. It's pretty interesting. And that is a picture of the first mayor back there on the back wall. So it's kind of fun. I know some cities have the actual count of how many city council meetings have happened since the incorporation. And so they always announce some fun stuff to go. So the 2022 charter, this charter was adopted by the people in 2022. It sets out the powers and how we function as a city council. Adam, do you want to talk on the form of government that's?
Yeah, a little bit, it's, the title that I have is the city administrator, and probably 75 to 80% of the cities in Oregon have a city manager versus a city administrator. More of the smaller cities typically have the city administrator format, and every city's charter kind of has some distinction between, it's kind of a city administrators often that denotes a strong mayor form of government where the mayor has some hiring and firing powers and and a variety of most, I think that's probably the standard unique attribute, but there are some others. Ours looks to be a little bit blended. It's not really a strong mayor format, but it's not a true city manager format either. I always say, I was the interim city manager in Ashland when a charter change moved it from city administrator to city manager. So I was both. In one day I was one, the next day I was the other. And when things are going well, it doesn't matter at all. Really, when things, get a little haywire, it's really good to have, the one versus the other. It's really good to have clarity about what it is and who has what role. And, I really found that, the city administrator format versus city manager doesn't have too much differences when everybody's collaborating, communicating, everything's going well. One thing that functionally happens is a lot of places switch to a city manager because the mayor, and with confirmation of council, would be able to hire department heads. And so the city administrator, who is supervising and putting together the management team, doesn't have hiring and firing abilities. That can be problematic. That's a little odd. So a lot of cities have changed that. I don't know what the stats are now, but I don't tend to worry too much about it. I think it's good. This charter is good that it has some clarity about that. My immediate prior place called the position of city manager, but did not have that reference in the charter. It was very ambiguous in their very old charter. So I think Coburg's in great shape. It was good to see, from my standpoint, when I got here, was looking that a fairly recent charter process had been undergone. So I think that's smart. They're hard because some charters actually have to go to the vote, the people to change. I'm not sure if all do.
Yes, this one did, all
As
do.
well, right?
Yes.
Okay. There's talk about different amendments that don't, but it's a big deal to change the charter. And sometimes to change the charter, it's not changing the form of government, and sometimes it is. So
What kind of, oh, go ahead.
Dr. Lehman?
Can you comment or elaborate about 2.5 years ago when Ray Smith was mayor? He wanted to move the mayorship to be from a strong mayor to current mayor status. Can you kind of comment on that? And then also at one time, Ann Heath job description was different than city administrator.
I don't recall the mayor wanting to move from the strong mayor position. But I know that one of the reasons that we updated the charter was to recognize the city administrator position rather than the city manager, because I think in the prior charter, it was city manager.
Yeah, that's correct. So council adopted an ordinance laying out the city administrator's jobs and duties. And in order to make that all legal and stand by our charter, because our charter didn't recognize that our charter is above an ordinance, it was incorporated into the charter. As far as a strong ordinance or strong mayor, Mayor Smith felt very passionately about a strong mayor. In working with him, it was very important to him that there was layers for a city. So the mayor didn't have too much power, nor did the city administrator. It was more a team with the council support. So
I do remember there was a shift though. I remember distinctly in the meeting, he thought that he had too much power and he was concerned if we got a mayor in the position,
mhm.
he did not feel that was the way it should be. And there were changes made.
And I remember that discussion, Councilor Lehman, when we were talking about charter changes and going through that process. And it was a debate. I remember it as a debate on certain things and why the recommendation was coming in that way and, talking back and forth.
It wasn't a significant change that was adopted.
Not in my recollection, because I remember, although I wasn't on this board at the time, I certainly remember having some animated discussions with your distinguished predecessor, Mayor Bell. And he was very curious to know what I thought. in some respects, and my thought was, and it still is, the way it is works, let's not jump over the fence if we don't have to.
Mhm.
And I think what Sammy has sort of brought forward and the reason that we identified the city administrator and clearly defined the roles was a reflection of there should be no one person in this city with all of the power or the majority of the power, that it really did need to be a collaborative effort. We needed to be working together. That's how I remember that time. Or debate, whichever.
So that puts us in the role of the mayor, and this is all in the charter in front of you guys, and it's just bits and pieces that I've pulled out. So the mayor is our executive officer of the city and the political head of the government. They're responsible for facilitating the council meetings, enforcing our council rules of governance, determines the order of business, supervises all officers except for the judge, appoints committee members with the support of the council, is responsible for signing ordinances, resolutions, agreements approved and authorized by the council. So I'm going to go back a little bit and then go to the role of the city administrator, and then I will come back to council since we've talked about how they are similar but different. So the city administrators under section 8.2 in our city charter, the city administrator is the chief administrator officer of the city. They're in charge of all of the city's administrative and personnel. They're responsible to the mayor and the council for properly administrating all city business. They're responsible for either preparing or seeing that the budget is prepared for the council, and they act as the chief advising officer for the city council. Adam, I'm sure there's more. There's about
Yeah,
25 things here.
yeah, it's well spelled out, and you could tell that was a focus of some of the charter stuff. It just seems, I think the section 8.1 above, the list of, roles and duties of the city administrator, the appointed officers. So that's where it's different than a strong mayor. So this says a majority of council must appoint or remove appointed officers. And Sammy, I believe the two of us are the appointed officers by charter, right?
And the judge?
And the judge, excuse me, that's right,
Yes.
3, yep. So that in a strong mayor form, you would see this, it typically would be the mayor would appoint or remove with confirmation of council. So the council can only say yay or nay to whoever the mayor brings forward. And so that, I think that gets to the conversation you had probably about former Mayor Smith, maybe wanting to de-emphasize that strong mayor role just slightly. So it's kind of an interesting hybrid where it still has some of those same powers as the executive officer is the mayor, as well as I think there's a reference to the political, I'm not exactly sure, the political head.
Of the government.
Yes, the political head of the city government, which is interesting. I'm not exactly sure. There's no definition for that.
I agree neither.
Means I shake a lot of hands.
Yeah, which is fine by
Just
me.
babies.
And then the city administrator role is the chief administrative officer, so the CEO, CAO. I think that section 8.1 kind of shows that hybrid of a reduction of a not quite a strong mayor, but not really fully a city manager format, kind of in between. I think it works well. I don't know if we need to go over all of the list of things that they've called out for the position. That's a pretty exhaustive list, and I think it works. And again, like I said, when things are going smoothly, you don't have to worry about this stuff. But when things maybe get a little testy and dicey about who's making decisions, this is what we fall back to. Yeah, explicitly.
It smells really smoky in here. All of a sudden, you guys smell.
Not food smoky, right?
sm-
Yeah. I don't know, you know, the city recorder as an officer is a pretty common, officer role as well. Super critical to have a little bit of a split, you know, some, independence there. Some, charters and, Ashland, a couple of former places ago, recently did a charter amendment to remove the elected, it was an elected position. That used to be much more common. The recorder, because the recorder often did all of the finance, that's before there were separate finance directors. So recorders were elected in many charters, way back in the day. I think
It
that's,
still is common in a great number of states.
yeah, in other states, it's less common in Oregon, but you're right. Yeah, it is more common in other, others, but, I think it's smart and it's good that it's in here that the recorder is an appointed officer and not, you know, not just a department, staff position. It has a little kind of that triangle or parallelogram of distribution of power and authority amongst the officers.
Great. So city council, the council's role as city councilors, you guys have the legislative authority. And you're the legislative body. So how do you guys make all of the decisions, I guess. And you make your decisions and make your policies through ordinance, strategic planning. You're involved in the hiring, firing of the city officers.
I think from a public standpoint, it's an important one, you know, that I think it makes sense in this room. We all kind of head nod when Sammy says that, right along, and that you know, the decision-making authority lies with you all. That it can get, you know, those are policy decisions, but administrative operational decisions, that's that fine line, where some places when things get a little testy, what's a policy decision, what's a administrative operational decision. So, you know, the way, you know, I like to look at it, functionally put it forward is, you know, you all are charting the course. We, you know, we staff make the decisions, and I organize that group to make the decisions to follow through with what you, how you want, you know, how you make decisions and to make sure those occur legally and properly. You know, on the flip side, before those decisions are made, our role on the staff side and administrators really to give you the best information possible, to bring you forward kind of all sides of an issue, pros and cons, you know, poke holes in different potential pathways, and then make sure that we're ready to, you know, and give you and make sure you realize which, you know, which ones we think are legal and not legal pathways. And then once those decisions are made, we carry those out on your behalf. But I think that's, for people that aren't in these rooms all the time, that's can be a little mysterious about who makes the decisions and which decisions are a council policy decision and which are day-to-day more operational administrative.
The way I understand your role, Mr. Ains, is a cross between chief of staff for the city and chief advisor to us.
It's a good way to put it.
It is. So that's the guiding document that lays out some of the rules and some of the processes and the baseline of how the council conducts their business day to day. From that, it sends out, or it requires you guys to adopt a council rules document. The last council rules document, which they call the rules of governance, was done in 2014, which was under a different charter. So we are working on updating and changing that and getting it synced up to the new charter and up into compliance. That will be coming back to council in February for consideration. Your rules of governance, it's pretty specific on what is covered in the rules of governance. It is supposed to govern how the body acts and how the meetings are run. And I think all of that's gonna be covered and discussed then. I don't have the rules of governance here in front of me, but
Yes.
it will talk more, I'm sorry, about what's required of your quorum. Your charter has a pretty different, I would say, than most charters, the voting. You know, a lot of the charter requires a quorum or a vote, a majority vote of the council versus a majority vote of the quorum. And those are, usually at a state level, you know, legally, some things are going to be required to have a majority vote of the council, like an ordinance versus just the quorum that's present, which can change that. Our charter requires the majority vote of the council for several different things. So that's getting kind of clarified and more laid out and directed in the council rules of governance, along with information on the presiding officers, how your agendas and the packets are laid out, which is also required to be clarified in the rules of governance through the charter. Talks about the liaison policy and how your liaisons are appointed and how they will be working.
Tammy, can I interject a
Yes.
question? Just for our new council members too, on the topic of voting. Can you just clarify for all of us when a council member wants to abstain?
Yes, Adam, can you?
Yeah, Sammy and I debated on that one right when I got here. It's different in Coburg's language than I'm used to. You know, my take is that, and in many charters and rules of governance are that you are here to make, you're elected and or appointed or elected to make decisions. And the only way to abstain is if you have a potential conflict of interest or an actual conflict of interest. There are procedures about how you go about that. The counselor has to request to abstain and state and typically this is generic, not here. You say why you need to abstain, and they need to be backed up by the definitions of a potential conflict of interest, where you might be personally financially benefited, or your family members might be personally financially benefited. That's the tight state definition. Or an actual is, it's clear you will be financially benefited. Either of those, then you request it. You know, we can make another counselor makes a motion to allow you to abstain, and then it gets voted on, and then either you do or you don't get to abstain. This charter and rules makes it a little easier. It doesn't require all of that. I like the more strict approach, but I'm also not a counselor, so it's your all's rules.
So in our situation, we can abstain, and then it's usually asked, they like to make a comment for why they abstain.
Yeah,
It's not required to give a comment. Well,
right. Yeah, that's it's less stringent than most places I've been.
in some of the cases where I've abstained has been, I didn't feel like I had enough information, either vote yes or no.
Right,
Yeah.
and so excuse me, Adam, but the 2014 charter that we used to work on, it addressed abstentions, stating that any counselor that abstained must put on the record, say why they abstained or why they voted no. That was removed from the charter, so our charter now is moot to the point, so it's becoming part of the council rules. So we're working on dialing it in with a couple different options for council to consider.
Just looking at you.
Right,
Yeah, and to answer yours, my opinion, again, it's a council, it's your body, it's operating how you want to set up the rules, and it's perfectly fine. My opinion would be if you don't have enough information, you vote no. That you don't vote in the affirmative unless you, and a lot of places.
No vote is an affirmative action.
Well, you're right. It depends on how the motions are framed, I suppose. Yeah.
So if we left it, and this is the stuff that Adam and I have been debating on. So if we did leave it, the council rules defer back to Robert's rules, and Robert's rules states that it's not counted. It's not an option to abstain. So you drop off the count, which can change the count, it can change everything
the
too.
math and.
Yep.
And
I think we need to resolve this because it's kind of in limbo.
we'll bring that back
We-
in February.
We just had an example of this not too long ago when Counselor Smith abstained from the Main Street sublease. Rightly so, that was,
But she had a declared conflict of interest.
Well, I would say that's, you know, from the most strict way to review that, that wouldn't, you would be legally allowed and, you know,
Right.
because there's no financial interest. You know, you'd have to declare whether there's a financial potential or actual financial interest.
when,
And when I do abstain, it's because I don't want to make it look like Main Street is swaying my vote or
Mhm.
council is swaying my vote. I don't have a problem voting on it. I think that I'm not comfortable with the idea that you can abstain and not give a reason. Just because maybe somebody in the community is gonna be upset with you. for
Right.
how you vote.
And that's where that slippery slope part is then you end up just deciding, you know, it gets a little flippant, you know, when you're really elected to make, you're elected to put what you think on the record. Whether it's a yea or nay, but it does, I agree with Councilor Lehman. We need to clarify it because as Councilor Bowman said, it can change the math and we have a somewhat complicated quorum versus majority that sometimes, if that is allowed to be more loosely put into the rules, we could have ordinances that don't, you know, that don't pass, you know, that even with I think it takes a majority of the council, but if we have a quorum, but not a majority of the council, I mean, and that drops off. It can be messy.
it changes too if a member vacates their seat because
Mhm.
then the quorum is reduced accordingly.
Yep.
And that can get complicated too.
I leave that to Sammy to do all that math every time to see where we're at. And when we put things together and we go, oh geez, we better have one more person come in. You know, if you've been in the planning commission or in quasi judicial proceedings, there's the ask of, the bias part. And that's really more of what I think you're getting at. And I think from on an ex parte contact and all that kind of stuff in a land use hearing proceedings, they take a different approach. And so when those come up, whether you're on the record or de novo, when appeals come to council, there's a lot of different procedural things that would not be the conversation that we're having now. They have other outlets to say, yes, I've had ex parte contact. No, it won't bias my decision. Or yes, I have ex parte contact, state what it is. And I do think it biases my independent ability to make, there's a script, independent ability to make a decision, and that then can trigger abstaining when you're in a quasi judicial land use hearing, which that's all state law stuff that's much more explicit and tight.
If I did that here, like with Main Streets, then you have to declare the ex parte conversation, correct?
Well, it's not a land
And the
use
council-
proceeding, so if you borrowed that kind of process from land use hearings, then I think it gets hard to do that, but that'd be the theory, is you would say that, that you're biased in some way. But a lot of people can be on boards of nonprofits and, and also be a counselor and also be a school board member and also be, there's a lot of things. And, really that's where I think the cleanest is to take the state law. Anytime from a staff position, I think we look at, okay, is there a reason to be more restrictive than state law says, or be more loose if it's allowed, but there's a standard. The body should have a good reason why it's kind of straying from the standard. And oftentimes they're great reasons. It's not a problem to stray, but we need to document, how we're differing and when that comes into play and how it comes into play, and make sure you all know, what wrinkles come along with it.
It would be really nice to just have a clear idea of when to abstain and when not.
Yeah, I gave you my clearest one.
Right.
You can't.
I'm good with that.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
if you've
I
got
assumed because I
financial-
was on the board that I had to abstain
right.
because of conflict of.
And you are completely within your rights under the charter and the
but I
council
have
rules
to
of
vote.
governance then. So this, but
So
we do
they
have a
can clean it up.
proposed change going
Okay.
forward.
I can give a very similar example in Ashland. We had to do every year, as we had a city councilor whose spouse was the executive director of the chamber, which is very similar to Main Street. She, and every year we had an allocation of transient lodging tax in a resolution. And, you know, a good chunk of that went to the tourism side of the chamber. And Counselor Slattery every year, and everybody knew it, before that agenda item was up, he would declare an actual conflict of interest, and actually wasn't just a vote. He did it at the front of the agenda item, so he would leave. He would be dismissed from the meeting, come back after that
Mhm.
agenda item was done, because he had a very clear, not potentially an actual, because a member of his household, his spouse, salary is at least partially based on that allocation from the city to the Chamber of Commerce. So, you know, there are those that come up and they're perfectly fine. They exist and everybody knew it, and it's just on the record. It's recorded by the city recorder, and nobody has to worry about it. And that council, I think legally, Counselor Slattery wouldn't have to leave the room, but that was a council rules thing to actually, because of nonverbals, or, you know, if things were weird, you know, somebody could, you know,
Yeah.
not vote, but still.
Taking a note.
Yeah, it'd just be, you know,
Have some
somehow
cards,
non-verbally influence
Yeah.
things, yeah. So very tangible one that we ran across, you know, at least once a year, by virtue of that. And we had some, you know, architects that also would have a project, or land use planners that were on the council that would have a project come through. And so they had a financial, it's really strictly financial interest. Yeah.
Obviously.
So the other comment I have related to this, not exactly, but it's tangent to it, and that is, when we have a meeting on Tuesday for our city council meeting, what is the date by which you try to get the packet information to us, so we have enough time to, especially when we have some complex, difficult, thick reading, deep readings? I'm just thinking in the back of my head, there, the times that I've abstained is when I didn't feel I got that information soon enough to read it thoroughly, to come to the meeting, and make a decision.
So Adam, I can answer with the proposed. It is not covered currently under our rules and regulations. In the proposed, which Counselor Lehman, it was in last month's package, so I do have a printed copy that I can give you. Is 3 business days preceding the meeting.
There are some extra, you know, when we have an ordinance, the ordinance has to be available for the public. The ordinance has to be available 7 days. So there's some other things. I've probably been pushing the limits of you know, lateness on the packets for you all. There's a benefit of it being super current from our standpoint. Also, it's a mad scramble to put packets together. So we have best intentions, and the week starts getting getting crazy, and we get later than we want. So definitely part of the council rules. That's the kind of stuff, the process stuff, and the administrative component of the legislative body should be embedded in those council rules. And we'll bring that forward. You can move them, and we will adjust however you all want that to occur.
3 business days for a Tuesday meeting, would that be Thursday or would that be Friday? Get the packet.
Business days.
I would say Thursday. Yeah.
Thursday, yes.
Yeah.
And Thursday before 5? Or
Yes, it's what it would be. It's not specified in here. And those are all things, and it's all across the board. I mean, it legally has to be out to the public 24 hours in advance
Right.
for any regular scheduled meeting. So that is our drop dead. Anything different than that is covered in here and what we have to do. Currently, it is not in our rules of governance.
If you
Nice
gave us,
to be able to get the packet a few days ahead and look through it, and then have red folder items for anything that comes up.
There will always be some red folder item on every meeting.
yeah, and really, in addition to this, which is a really important topic, I think it's good to get on the same page with it. But in addition, what our internal goal, and I think it's pretty common in the profession, is not to bring you a topic that we haven't had at least some cursory conversation
Mhm.
about, right? So the goal would be, unless it's really urgent from a timing or regulatory pressures, is we'll have talked about it or at least prepped on it in a work session or at least in a city administration report that, hey, this is coming, here's a little, and I've tried to do some memos and those sometimes end up being red folder items. But they're not for decisions that, that night, they're for, prep for the next time. So that's a real push internally here, is we want to make sure that that you aren't seeing something completely fresh that you're making a decision on. Unless there's really rare circumstances that we at least have some prep. And then what I always love is if those spark your interest or questions is, give me a call, email, stop by and chat about those even before we get a packet out. Because that is a huge objective of ours, as Councilor Bowman succinctly put it about being the chief advisors, is we need to make sure you understand the information we're putting forward. And if we don't have everything in there that you need, that we go get it for you.
I believe that was the direction at the last meeting too, Adam, from you, was for counselors to let us know if there's any changes or recommendations
Yeah.
or tweaks to the council rules. So I will make sure that you have one of these before I leave today, because council packets are next week. So you
Yeah.
can,
A lot of what was in that draft, I think was, not, it was pretty standard stuff.
Yeah.
But we did put some highlighter spot where we said, more language to come.
Yeah.
And then there's some other, if there's any other topics that you see that just aren't in there that have been kind of either curious to you or you're wanting to pin down that you think it makes sense to always be the process, that's the document that we should put it in. And it's a resolution, so it is changeable. I've seen council rules reviewed every year. I've definitely seen it every other, like in elections there, sometimes. I've been a part of this where a council rules document is specifically addressing the behavior of a particular counselor. And said, hey, this is not working for us as a group, and you create rules that, reform that. Sometimes that's subtle and sometimes it's very explicit where people know exactly what the rule came from. But it's to make the, the group function and decisions to be, hopefully smartly made.
Yeah, schools do that too, to prevent specific people. I can clue you. One of the rules we had was no gum whatsoever. Because it's nasty, and so you develop those rules.
Yep.
Much to the chagrin of the population sometimes, but
Yeah, and it can look, it can make a document really
yeah.
thick, when you have a lot of rules for things that don't come up very often, but when they do, you need it. Or the group feels that they need it. So let us know if there's things missing in there, but the council packet thing is one that we really internally, it's primarily a Sammy and I function. And we have some internal due dates. If there's other staff that have to get us stuff, I probably driven Sammy a little bit crazy with how we've done it. I haven't, we changed some of the processes when I got here, and then we haven't really landed completely. It's been a little ad hoc, and we're working to get that tighter. But we look at, council packet week. We start out Monday meeting and say, what do we need? What do we already have? Who's pulling together what? And between the two of us, the goal is really Wednesday end of day to have that done. It's been Thursdays more, and then Fridays, often we'll get it done Thursday night and say, okay, let's look at it Friday morning, fresh eyes, and then get it out the door. So you probably see it often on a Friday, early mid-morning. If that's not adequate, and I totally understand if it isn't, I primarily will rearrange my my schedules and make sure that we get it done earlier.
Friday's a little late for me.
And I think, speaking for myself, and this is a situation unique to me, obviously, but with the accommodations piece, the more time the better. I hate to be pain in the butt about it, but with the accommodations piece, the more time the better, please, because that takes me more time to get it in a usable form where I can do what I need to do.
Yeah, and it's a really good point, and we, you know, it's something for, you know, the red folder kind of system as well. That can be challenging, you know, when it's the last second item as well. And it's challenging for anyone in the public to be tracking what's going on. You know, we can make it happen on the fly and it works, but our goal, you know, is to be as, you know, we do have a level of methodical that we need to be, and that, you know, it takes staff resources, but that is a priority. Decisions here are a governing priority, right? So we will adjust to make those happen however this body wants it.
So it sounds like Thursday.
We'll put the default language in there as Thursday, and then you guys can play with it, you know, on February if you want to alter it from whatever language we put forward, but we'll put that as a default.
Good conversation.
Yeah.
Great. Some of the other changes that are being included in the rules of governance is the appointment process. That was nothing that was ever clearly stated. We've kind of done differently over the years. And it's a little bit uncomfortable sometimes when you're doing an appointment. I think, yeah, Adam's been here for a couple, so there's a couple different options for that as well. We will be talking about attendance and strengthening the verbiage in that, just not because there's an issue or a problem, just for clarity for all, so we know how to record it, whether it's just an absent, it's an excused absence, what the requirements are.
And do you as a body care if they're excused or not excused, and what defines excused, who defines excused? Those are, again, those are all fine until something gets problematic, and then you do need to kind of lean on the established definitions and rules. So
Currently, we have excused and unexcused absences. And it factors into whether or not counselor member can be voted out because of unexcused absences. That's the current language, isn't it?
I don't know right off the top of my
not
head.
sure if it's voted out or are out.
it-
You know, we can look at that if you,
Whether it's voted out or are out, it's dependent on whether it's excused or unexcused.
Well,
That's, because we had that issue with the counselor member about.
No, we
years ago.
did. That's, yeah.
no, and these are common issues that a lot of the council rules, you know, it will use excused or unexcused, but then it doesn't give any guidance.
Definition.
Yeah, it doesn't give any guidance to how do you distinguish
I
the
think
two.
it needs to clarify who makes the decision that
Right.
it's excused and unexcused. How is it communicated from the absent counselor to the mayor or to the administrator and have it deemed? Because we did have the issue.
a lot
And
of-
that's what
a
we're
lot of that
covering
is
in these
done
rules.
Internally,
Mhm.
and those conversations certainly happen between, typically they come from me to that counselor.
Yeah, and that is a pretty
Whichever counselor.
normal as the from the mayor's slot, a lot of that kind of stuff, administrative decision making on the council rules, policy stuff. That the mayor typically has a decision, but it can be, you know, confirmed or appealed or, you know, discussed by the group, but the initial decision is typically pointed at the mayor's
And
position.
that makes sense because the mayor is our presiding officer anyway.
Right.
So that makes sense
Yep.
that he or she would decide the.
I just bring it up because it sounds like you're trying to tighten in some of these things up. So
Great one.
that's an
Yep.
area that needs to be tightened.
There-
What's
there-
excused, who's unexcused, who makes.
There
the
is,
decision.
there is language within our rules at this point that is fairly clear. It's not down to the level, the granularity of what constitutes excused or unexcused. What we have done, I think in the past, I mean, things happen and all of us, there will be times when we're unable to attend. We don't say, are you sick? Are you, you know, we don't get down to that level of granularity, but if it's excused, we've taken that as that counselor has let us know
Right.
that they will be unable to attend, and we do not ask the reason why. There is language that says, you know, X number of absences within Y
Period.
timeframe would constitute a dismissal. generally before, and I can speak for myself, but I can speak for prior mayors too, before it reaches that critical point, those conversations are being had. And Sammy keeps records, and we know exactly how many counselors have attended on which meetings or how many have been missed. And often it's like, oh, I didn't realize I'd missed that many or had missed that many in a row. Each counselor is very important to making the decisions for this city. So it is something we do watch. I don't know if we can get down to absolute black and white, but we'll do our best.
Yeah, I'm just saying,
Yeah.
since you're trying to pencil it down, is it just council meetings? Is it the liaison meetings? Is it?
I agree.
budget Meetings? I mean, is it all meetings or is it just council meetings?
Yep, I've been through this in another place where it was, the liaison part was talked about, and you can choose your level, clearly, and I've seen it go all the way down, and I'm not sure if it's helpful or not, but I think the easiest just to follow on that one, and we'll get the language in there, is excused and unexcused is usually a notice of 48 to 72 hours. It's a pretty clean, you don't have to make a subjective, oh, that vacation's okay, but this thing, what they're, the reason
I
why
like
they're
that
not,
better.
the why, it's usually just a notification in advance or
Nashville's
not.
okay, LA,
That's right.
not.
That's it.
And the whole new piece of this too is electronic meetings and being able to
Yes.
join the Zoom
Yes.
meetings by Zoom.
And that
was
has
never
made
an
a
option
huge
before.
difference.
And there
And
are
that's a big
cities
one.
that do not allow that, still. They, you have to decide. But there are some changes that state law that the public is allowed that way. So it's stranger and stranger for counselors to different city councils to not allow that. But it can, I mean, there's some justification or at least debate about how that impacts the body's work and functioning. So, but that adds another layer of complexity to kind of think about,
And policy.
and policy that goes along. Yep. And policy development to go with it, because you got to have it. Yeah.
So that's a quick overview of the charter and the council rules, which are kind of the base documents that kind of go over the city council positions and the mayor's positions. There's several other very important key documents, as you guys know, that come off of those documents. And there's copies of these all over there if you guys want to see them, but we're going to start with the comprehensive plan. I'm not going to pull it up because probably hard for Kathy to read through it as I'm scrolling through. But Adam, do you want to talk a little bit
Sure.
about the role the comprehensive plan has with us?
Yep. Before I hit that, just a real quick note that on some of the notes that Sammy and I had, what other hats the city council wears, unless we hit that and I missed it.
Nope, thank you.
Urban renewal, the city council is also the board. Yeah, you're the board of the urban renewal agency. Some urban renewal agencies, not all are done by councils. That's probably the most common, is that the council is also the urban renewal governing body. Some do where 2 counselors and 2 appointed members, or 3 appointed and 2 counselors. It can be a hybrid. A few cities set up urban renewal where the council isn't a part of that board at all. That's not nearly as common. It's usually either a hybrid or the council is 100% switches hats for a different meeting and becomes the urban renewal board. And that's the way it's set up here. So you all also are the urban renewal. So if you're padding your resumes, don't forget to mark that down, that you're urban renewal agency board member. And you are also as Councilor Bowman said, the local contract review board. And you'll hear us say that in meetings occasionally. That's a kind of a formality, but it matters because you have a different role when you are doing that. And we talked about it a little bit when we did our contract ordinance, our procurement and purchasing ordinance update. You really aren't, it's a different decision-making matrix. You are looking to ensure that the procedure was followed properly. You are not looking at did the right decision of the options that were available really aren't looking at, is that the right one? You're looking at, did the process get followed properly? So that's why we bring that up when in council meetings, is just, it's a helpful reminder to say, slightly switch gears and say, here's what you're deciding on for this particular agenda item. And then we revert back. Some places will save those up and do a kind of a separate meeting of the local contract review board. If you got a lot going on, and you go through all the contracts just under those, and it's a separate meeting. I doubt we'll ever have a situation where we have that much going on from a contracts that it needs to be done that way. And then we talked about this one a little bit as liaisons, and I think that one is probably the most nebulous from city to city and council to council throughout the state and beyond. I think it's a really important one, and even loose rules on that are still really effective. I think it's a great tool. It's a great learning tool for counselors. It's a great way to spread the load out on representing, the body in a lot of different places, both on our local, internal kind of advisory committees, as well as the external agencies. And, some places have a lot of external, and they'll formally make appointments kind of outside the annual or special liaison things that may not last. They may be a year, they may not be an ongoing liaison, but and that'll be part of our council rules process as well. Appointments are made by the mayor on that. So the charter talks about, I think, the appointment part, but how many we have and how they function would be in the council rules. So I'll jump over to comp plan.
I think you forgot one thing, and it's one thing that I'll never forget. We are the SDC appeal deciders too.
There you go. Yes, and that's in ORS, and there's a reference to the city council being there's quite a few of those very specific niche things that you're also that's the role you fill on administrative appeals or other similar types of appeals. Anything that administrative process happens and we make decisions operationally, there's typically the final relief valve is, hey, if you're still not satisfied, you're going to the council. That isn't 100% the case. There are processes that don't do that, but you kind of have to explicitly give it a different avenue to that. The comp plan, this is a state mandated document. Every city has one. I always refer to those as that's the Bible. That's what you go to. That is the long range policy formulation document. It keeps everybody, every city legal to the state land use goals. This came about after Senate Bill 100, which was the landmark Oregon land use nationally. People took note of Senate Bill 100. Oregon has done some very unique land use stuff, and we're wrestling with the 40 or 50 years later, impacts of that and remolding a lot of it. But it is the guiding document. So and they're intended to be pretty broad. They are policy statements. They aren't code. So typically how you accomplish these policy statements and objectives is often through the development of code language, ordinances, and resolutions. So it by itself isn't independently enforceable, but it is the kind of the macro policy direction on all of the mandated chapters or elements, goal numbers. There are some more goal numbers than are listed on this document that refer to people on the coast have an extra goal that's related to the coastal natural resources. So there's a few others that aren't in here that just don't apply to Covert. But this is kind of the next thing down from the charter is in Oregon is the comp plan. And that guides kind of everything. And so when we do master plans and we do large policy land use adoption type 4 legislative actions, those are in often, there's a reference to what goal that particular ordinance furthers or helps enact. This is not too old, amended in May of 18. Megan probably has a better take on, and Sammy both, on what, what might have been updated in 2018. I don't know if there's much more to say than that. It's supposed to stand the test of time. It's not supposed to be monkeyed with too often. You want to make them kind of bigger picture. It's at the least 10-year kind of an objective, to more of a 20-30 year. It's a really long range planning document. And then you adopt ordinances more frequently that help you smartly, hopefully implement them.
Was planning commission looking at the comp plan?
They did a review. Yeah, that was part of this last calendar year, was going through that. And actually DLCD, Patrick, who I think has come here before, fabulous resource from DLCD. He's our regional DLCD rep, and he and Megan went through. He didn't hit all of them, but he had some slide decks of some kind of an overview of it, and how it nests into the state law and what we're required to do. Yeah, and so they basically was a review. It wasn't really with a particular eye on amending one of the goals or changing it. When we talk about our transportation system plan, some of that then gets into the transportation goal number. So it can trigger a desire, sometimes a desire to go ahead and do a comp plan amendment, which is really significant process from the state for noticing and kind of procedural. But it's one of our guiding documents.
So with that, Adam, we go charter, comprehensive plan is a big piece as a guiding document. And then I'm gonna kind of do it because of time, go a little bit higher than that would be master plans. And so we have a couple different master plan, or I think 2 different master plans. We have a park and open space master plan, a transportation master plan, and a water master plan. That would be our next level. And those are adopted by ordinances, just to get when we're making our decision, you're making your decisions, when we're implementing our decisions or making our recommendations, that would be the order that we would follow those documents. And Adam, can you speak to a little bit about what's covered in a master plan?
Yeah, and we also have we're working right now on a storm drain master plan. So that will be another master plan. So really master plans are for all of our utility systems, and in a sort of different way. And we talked about this at Park and Tree Committee. Parks are an infrastructure, they are a system. So they have a master plan as well. It's more traditionally thought of in the kind of hard utility stuff. They chart out at least a 20-year infrastructure planning period, and SDCs are based on that 20-year master plan horizon. Our rates refer to the 20-year master plan for how they're established, because you have rates that have to take into account paying for that capital that's required by each utility in that 20-year horizon. It's they're typically 20-year plans. They get updated on and probably most typically about a 12-year. 15 is the 10 is the shortest, 15 is usually the longest. You see, you can wait a full 20 years. Most of the time there's enough change in a master plan, either kind of population, demographics, regulatory. There's some significant changes that trigger an update to a master plan. Funding often requires a master plan to be only so old. They'll say, when our next round of water, I'm almost positive, even though the water master plan was 2016, the next time we go and try to get funding for water capital, they're going to say, well, have you updated your master plan yet? So we'll be kind of plugging that in, knowing that that's a component. Our wastewater has a facilities plan, which is similar to a master plan, and we did some very small capacity analysis work that is really more of a technical update, not a full-blown update to the master plans. But the master plans are critical. They're critical to how we budget, how we do our capital, how we do our rates, how we do our SDCs. Kind of they're the guiding force for that. Full of all kinds of technical information about our systems.
Are there any questions on any of those documents? Like I said, you have copies of them. If you're not familiar with them, you will become familiar with them. And anytime that it's a lot of stuff to take in, We used to print it all out of a binder and say, hi, welcome to the city council, and hand it to you at everybody's face. We always tie in our staff reports. Adam's really, really good at that too, back to the document and the policies and lay out the options and stuff that it's come to. So you don't have to feel like you have to learn it all right now. Just know where the tools are
Yeah,
and what
that's-
information.
Something we've talked about as a team is our template for staff reports we're trying to have a spot, about what, what policy document that, and not everything we bring forward, relates cleanly to a particular policy document, but if it is something that's related to either the framework or to which we haven't talked about yet, or to any of the master plans or to the comp plan, I think it's handy to know how what we're bringing forward nests into the bigger system that 5-10 councils before you had made decisions on, and that really helps with that long-term continuity, of councils and governing a community.
Like peeling an onion. And all of the layers have to fit together.
It is.
So yeah, sometimes it can make us cry. Yes, that's very, very well put.
Well, I hope it doesn't smell too bad.
Well, that kind of goes into one of my big projects for the next couple years in my department that's on your guys' goal list too, is codification. A lot of cities have these codes and these municipal things codified, so it's in one working, easy, self-explaining document tool for the citizens, for the staff, instead of buried in 240 ordinances and 170 resolutions.
Yep.
Some appeal, it just a lot of stuff to keep straight. So we're working with Civic Plus preliminary on hopefully becoming codified by the end of 2026, which
It's, as Sammy said,
Big
it's a big deal, because not only do there's a model code that League of Oregon Cities puts out and kind of organizes. So if you look at cities' municipal codes, that ordinances that's how ordinances, when somebody says, hey, what's your code? It's really enacted by an ordinance. That's how you get a code.
Right.
And so the code is where they all reside. And a challenge with not having those codified and in one place is you may pass ordinances 5 or 10 years apart that define a word 2 different ways. So you miss some commonalities, and you may have some conflicts that you don't even know you have conflicts because you're inadvertently have parts of a different ordinance, or have you repealed it all? Did one live on? It's just a more uniform way to track all of that, and also obviously more organized for the public to be able to quickly look up. And and so the codification we can take our whole list of ordinances, put it where it belongs. General government is chapter 1, revenue and finance is typically chapter 4, land use code is typically 18, nuisance stuff is usually 9. So in most cities, you'll see the same kind of format. That's pretty easy, is to take all of our ordinances, put it there. The hard part is to look at definitions, look at conflicts, are these duplicative? So there'll be a mountain of work, not only for us, but for council when we bring that forward, because there'll be tons of little Scribner style stuff. There'll be things that say, well, do we want, branches, vegetation over sidewalks to be 7 feet or 8 feet? Our 1968 ordinance says 7, or this other utility one says, 8. And where do we want? What are we resolving? Some of those administrative, and a lot of them will be very easy to do. It just, we have to tee them up for you, and you have to go through them and actually do it to codify. And then we have the software side of it. They've got great tools. If you look at most city codes, you've got them organized. It's just a library. You hit the plus, it pops up the next, and really easy to navigate. And from the development standpoint for people coming in to do land use projects, really hard right now to be able to point them to tons of different places rather than one unified spot.
Sounds like a really good teaching tool and communication tool for council as well as.
Yeah.
public.
Oh, it's huge.
Yeah, and you know, we're pretty good, and Sammy will bring them up. She's the best on the team and queuing us up for, oh yeah, that was this and it's back here and here's where that lives. But even on some like abandoned vehicles, there's kind of, oh, there's a piece of it here in this nuisance thing. There's a piece of it over here. Is that what they meant? What is abandoned? And did the code define it? Did it not? Did it have anything to do with whether it's registered and able to be driven? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. So there's a lot of worthy cleanup work there, and it's big. So, and that is, maybe to get to the last document, we'll be hitting this. Obviously, this is the headliner for the retreat, but this is kind of that next one down where it's not quite operations, but it's how we go about doing our work to accomplish all of these things. And the objective last year was really to take more of a task list approach to goals and actions, and really put them into we call it a framework. So then year to year, we're making progress on something. A lot of the tasks are there; they're embedded in the topics. And so there's 5 major categories that hopefully cover anything and everything an individual counselor or the group can think of that we do, that's part of our core services. And then within those 5, there are 4 objectives, and that was just our starter kit to say, here's what we think we've got as a work plan that I gleaned from the prior year's goals documents. I gleaned from talking with staff. I gleaned from my meetings with you all and put them together. And like I said, many of these are multi-year, and probably the next evolution of this document, it won't probably happen this year, but it's in this document is actually the evolution, which is a strategic plan. This marches us towards a strategic plan. What this doesn't do, and we'll get to in the retreat to some degree, is prioritize. This kind of, by not prioritizing it, kind of puts them all as equal importance. And in a way that was, I think, okay for the first year, because we bit off pieces of parts as we could. We want to increasingly look at being aligned with council in what are the highest priorities to knock off the list. And some of these, like I say, can be knocked off in a focused 6 months. That means that what else that person or team might work on has to wait until that 6 months is done. And we've been doing a lot of that shuffling. And I think we try to keep you abreast, in council meetings and city administration updates, but a better, the next level is to really put this into a format that does break down what are the major tasks, what are the expected timelines to accomplish, and then some sort of way to do some progress reporting on that. And that's more of a strategic plan. This to me is our starter kit towards a strategic plan. And then we've signed ourselves up for some consulting through League of Oregon Cities for that. Hopefully this spring that we can step into. I think we'll go through our retreat exercise and update this and use it as our probably primary talking points, and then work on getting it into some sort of strategic plan format, and then talk about kind of community engagement, how that part fits into shaping the plan.
I was just thinking today, as we go into the retreat, I might find it helpful if, given the current federal and changes at the federal level that will affect the state level, what are there specific things for our city that we need to be aware of going forward in the next 2 years that will impact? I'm sure it's going to impact some things if.
Yeah, we've talked about that a lot.
No, yet.
Right, it's pretty early.
The kind of, just programs that are funded, where we get our funding and what it might impact as far as how we prioritize.
Yeah, I'll give you a real quick take on that one. Is right now we're pretty okay. We've looked at all of our stuff. It's the immediate, the problems that cities are facing. The National League of Cities, Oregon League of Cities, where we were up in the Capitol, this came up clearly, and then of course the funding freeze just got an administrative stay, happened this afternoon, and only until Monday. Things are going to change daily. Right now, the cities that are in actively, like community development block grant, cities. Those were paused, right? Those funds were paused. Now they're unpaused, until Monday, but, there are some cities that have some programs, that are more known to be immediately as soon as the faucet gets dialed back, there's a problem. We talked about that as a staff already, right when stuff was happening. We're not seeing anything immediate. Our disbursements for the water loan have, I don't know the mechanics behind the scenes on the state side of that. That's a combination of state and federal funds, whether they've been front loaded that money and
Right.
then we're doing the drawdown. We're kind of one layer removed, but ultimately in aggregate, that could be a problem later on. If they're not able to, if the state's not able to access funds that at least partially fund that program, we could be impacted. We have, compared to other cities, I mean, it's still way too early for any city really. But we don't have anything active in the hopper. Like if we did get that solar, Oregon Department of Energy solar grant, I would say we probably wouldn't want to pull the trigger and start paying invoices and without knowing for sure that the reimbursement that we get actually has funds.
And
But we're not
it's
there yet.
It's not so much that we're there or that, we won't know the specifics. It may happen, it may not. It just would be nice to know that these are things in our city that have potential to be impacted. Not, like I thought about the park and I don't know where we are on that grant and I can't even remember really where it came from.
State Parks and Rec, yeah, and we've been,
So that's been front loaded.
yeah, we've been getting drawdowns on that and
Lots
it's
of money.
not federal funded.
But, I know it could impact a lot of things. It might be nice just to know what areas have potential to be
Well, and I think
possible.
part of that, and this will come up at the retreat, is for us really to look at what our core services for the city. What are the absolutes? And how do we fund them? And what are the really nice things that we
Right.
want to fund? But what are the things that we absolute? And I think that's
Reprioritization.
that's a topic it's gonna be a rough ride.
Well,
And
and
it's-
one of the things that probably doesn't change at all, is, the uncertainty of large capital funding, right?
Right.
So that's never been certain, right? So it's just a different kind of uncertain temporarily. So, what programs, stay funded, what don't, way too early. And we're not actively seeking those. Really, the part that's the most challenging are people that either are right near the finish line or just past the finish line. Those are the spots, because other than that, we can talk about what normally we touch in terms of federal, through our general ledger, through our stuff. And it's basically a portion of our large capital loans and grants would come into that. But those are susceptible to changes all the time, and it run out of money.
Sure.
Even just the program doesn't change, just the funding is exhausted, right? Too much competition for it.
I think
So
it's just helpful to know as we prioritize what we are looking at, like Mayor Bell said, going forward, that we need to be aware of what could be impacted by federal monies.
it's probably gonna be things that aren't ours. They're gonna be one layer removed. It's gonna be county and state programs. So we will see impacts,
It'll trickle
but
down.
not impacts that we deal with directly, that we have our
Yeah.
direct fingerprints on.
Indirectly.
There'll be service, they'll FEMA, is another one, that, and it's really, way too early to say whether that is ultimately long-term better or worse for us, if we're looking selfishly, which we should look selfishly at us. The concept of FEMA going away and direct allocation of funds to states, that may or may not be a negative. It depends, we just don't know how they're gonna programmatically lay that out. There's opinions that the regional approach for FEMA isn't super effective. It goes through Seattle. And the delays of getting the money, we went through to get $40,000 or $50,000 of FEMA funds, there was a lot of work.
One of the things in talking about FEMA is who knows where it's gonna go, but as a city, I feel like as a counselor, my focus is changing somewhat in that just because it's no longer if it becomes that it's not a federal mandate or we don't get money, we still need to prioritize our own community with the knowledge we have and know what we need and what resources we need that may be completely up to us. I know Mayor Bell's husband has stepped forward to do a lot of that planning. We're in pretty good shape. I guess my gut feeling is maybe we need to prepare for complete and total independence on how we're going to be able to do that. That's the worst case scenario, but
And I think that probably still, in the current structure and in a future structure, that is the worst case scenario, right? And it's just a probability thing about how that occurs. And really, again, so quickly, our own stuff is exhausted and it's regional, it's county, state, federal, really quickly, regardless. We just don't have the capacity, nor the funds to actually, we can draw what that might look like. Now, how we can shape it,
Right.
is very, very different. Because it doesn't take much of anything of emergency to say that, it's the county and the state that, either assist us, or not. And
and
again,
just looking at who, just drawing on those community resources and knowing what we have in place where we don't have to rely on, which Coburg probably wouldn't be relying on outlying sources to help us a lot anyway, because we're not a very dense population, but I just look at the resources we have in our community, like with the asset mapping and that, and it might be a good time to know what we have available at our own fingertips that maybe doesn't cost money, but resources that are there in an emergency if we don't have the.
Well, and I think, again, Coburg is in a pretty good place, mostly because of our relationships with other agencies within our region. Because when it comes right down to it, no matter what the emergency is, your first line of defense is what's in your region. What can you tap right then? Even if FEMA continues to exist in perpetuity, unchanged, it's a large organization, and having been deployed after Katrina as a FEMA volunteer and a FEMA team, it was very, very cumbersome. So it's a slow moving. Now they will, when they know a disaster, a natural disaster is going to hit, they will pre-position, but it still takes time.
And it is the community's responsibility. I guess that's where my
Exactly.
emphasis is. It's basically our responsibility to know what we have and how we can respond quickly and who those people are. And you hope for the best down the road when things calm down.
Exactly.
well, and typically those are, very short period of time locally. 24, 48, 72 hours, and then you're exhausted of your local resources, and that's even bigger cities. It takes regional, state, FEMA, federal. Anytime you have a significant emergency over 48 hours, you're going to struggle. And no local communities really are going to be able to do much. You can have communication systems. There's some things, but I guess in the macro, to back up to the whole thing, I think we are. Our general operations day to day are not very impacted by what's going on at the federal level. I think there are residents and businesses that might be impacted that, again, back to our core services, not part of what we deliver, Medicaid, if those kind of things, if people's, individuals in Coburg may be impacted, may not. But I think ours, in getting back to kind of the framework and the core services conversation, what part of all this is really ours here. You put on the hat of a community member. It's similar but slightly different hat than we put on when we're talking about the local government of Coburg.
And I guess, just looking at those two things being interchangeable, because government depends on community, community depends on government, and I know we are gonna have people possibly impacted with not having work and.
Yeah, I mean, those are the longer term, like, what does that mean to our core services if, all these other multitude of other scenarios may or may not occur? And I guess, my take is the immediate stuff, we don't have any, what I would really think from a practical standpoint is if we had any expenditures pending that were backed or reimbursed by federal dollars, we would just say pause. Like, we would take a time out and say, unless we're okay with still spending it and not getting reimbursed, which we might, I bring it forward and say, 50-50, that if we spend this, we won't get the money that we thought we were gonna get. We want to move forward, and that would be the conversation. I think those are the kind of things that are more, and that's for the cities that are right on that, just before and just after awarding of funds. We're not in either spot, so we're not really at much risk financially right now. Yeah, but it is, we're monitoring it. I mean, it's we're kind of the tail at the bottom of all of that, but there will be impacts seen. There always are, of any sort of change of administration. What is the focus? And where do we fit? Where can we leverage? That's the other part. With change, every administrative change has some things where we can maybe, you win some, you lose some, you take advantage of what's going on over here, and maybe the thing you were hoping for dries up or delays or something, but something else can come around, and that's the nimbleness of more of a strategic plan, is to say, okay, where do we shift to take advantage of some of those things? And really a lot of that's going to be on our state partners to help us know what things to possibly even are available to take advantage of, just like we do now. League of Oregon Cities is is a big asset to figuring that out. Our professional partners, our relationships with the county and ODOT and all those others, there's so much of it that is really beyond our layer. Connected to it.
We did meet with both Representative Harbeck. I have such a hard time with that name. I apologize. And Senator Hayden today. I was going to say Cedric. So those were good meetings. We got some input back. We were able to say, these are the things that we need your help with. And we got some input back about how we can best present that to them in a time frame.
Yep.
So in terms of financial, big projects and little projects, and that was helpful.
Yeah, the state programs right now are having the questions you're talking about, is, because that shapes healthcare for the state, is the federal funding. It's a big one. And
Education.
and what kind of reserve do they have to kind of keep operating and just kind of expect that the spigot turns back on, or there's just a lot of risk analysis.
There was on the news tonight, right before I came, the treasurer in state of Oregon was saying Oregon has enough funds put aside that they can meet short-term needs.
Mhm.
Define short-term, but
Yes.
yeah, hopefully this all helpful.
Yeah, I think it's definitely something that we'll be keeping tabs on, keeping informed of, but I don't see any immediate short-term financial risk to us. And that, of course, that's number one from an operational standpoint, but then being clued into community resident impacts and whether those can be softened by stuff we do or not, is a conversation. Sometimes they can't, we can just empathize. But sometimes a city government does have some tools, sometimes they don't, to offer some way to soften the edges of different things. And it's hard to know what might hit a lot of people, or or what they're talking about hitting really niche people. So.
Okay, well, hopefully, I think we have, that we did mention the urban renewal. We have an urban renewal plan. We'll talk about that in retreat too. That's something to look at for when that finishes its time. What is it? Right now it's existing to pay wastewater debt. Very valuable tool for us. Is it leverageable to be something else in the future? What are the pros and cons of that? But there is a urban renewal plan which is required in order to have that, and deferring those taxes over to that particular thing. So future conversations, but the emergency management, Councilor Smith, that's under our community, number one, emergency management response, and so those are those prioritization things, because we can't attack all of these the way we have to decide what ones we're gonna attack, because they're time consuming on a staff that is, you'll hear me repeat this one over and over, that is full of operational day to day. And so we have capacity, but not for 100% of this on a tight time frame. 100% of this over a longer haul, yeah. And then we need to figure out priority collaboratively and land on that, and then stick to it. Yep.
Questions, comments?
And nobody's gonna resign being a counselor right after boring talk about kind of the structure of things. We're still all in, right?
Sammy, I had a question just on information. I know you gave us our books. If we write on our packet, do we need to give you the notes from our packet?
Yeah, if you do have to give them to me or retain them in your city council file at home that you'll turn in when you're no longer running. They are public.
And then like, I do notes in the book.
And
or
notes
is
in the
it- and
books,
is
right?
that something when I'm done with
Mhm.
council that I come into you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
What's this
I'm a
simplest thing?
perjurer. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, what I've seen people do is just basically have their own little storage box somewhere, and they use them, and then just when they're done, they just plop it in there, and then 4 years, 8 years, however many years later, when they're done with council, they just, here you go, and they feel really good. They go, yes, get it, it's gone. Yeah,
And Sammy goes, oh.
yeah.
And if you don't want to keep it for the 4 to 8 years, you have a file here already, so it goes in there. So
I got
correspondence.
3
and stuff.
crates from Ray.
I've gotten box loads from you.
Wait, we have notebooks, I don't know.
I do have the notebook.
We have these little books.
And we keep them until we don't need them, or what do we
You
do?
keep them until you're no longer a counselor, or some people do it on an annual basis.
Okay.
And so
Yeah.
all notes that are taken in here then need to be public record until they go to Sammy.
Okay,
Yeah, they are a public
Wherever you
record.
keep
You don't
them.
have to take notes, right? You,
I've gotten some pretty drawings from some counselors back over the
I
years.
mean,
One was very good.
I take notes at home in my own personal notebook, should I not do that any?
no, that's fine. These are, I mean, from a records, go ahead. From a
Mhm.
record standpoint, it's in the
During the
meeting.
meetings.
Sure. Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Or if it pertains to council business.
Public meeting, council business and deliberation.
Right.
So you can do your homework in a study and that is fine, but if it's an email going back and forth on a
well,
certain
sure,
thing,
yeah,
Or notes that you take regarding a meeting or a discussion, and those are public record.
well, sometimes I will summarize the things we talk about in my own personal notebook at home. Just so I can keep it fresh in the mind. Should I not do that, or?
You can do that. You can do that. You might have to disclose it as, or, put it on the record if it's not public record until it comes into the public meeting. So,
But should he turn that in when he's no longer a counselor?
yeah, no, you
No.
don't have to.
Don't
If
need
it's
to.
just summarizing and making notes to yourself after the meeting.
Yeah.
To me, it's notes that you take during the meeting.
It's notes that you take in it, yeah.
It's part because it's a contributor to deliberation and decision, right? And that's what in the public meetings are about. So, yeah, notes that help you formulate your ideas or added questions when you you know, when you bring them to the meeting, of course, when you say them, they're recorded as part of, we take care of all that. So this is just trying to take care of the thing that we don't already take care of.
Right,
in the
right,
meeting.
right.
Yeah.
It's part of that transparency.
Well, absolutely. Just trying to figure out.
Yep. Everybody should get their system, you know, once you get a system, you and feel, it's always great to pass it by, you know, Sammy, say, here's my system. You know, does it work? You know, what are the flaws here?
And that's also another good resource for League of Oregon Cities, and one of their handouts on your thumb drives is public records notes and trainings on what you can do and how long you need to save them and how to destroy them. That's another thing. You can't just toss them away. They have to, a lot of stuff has to be logged and have a number assigned to it that it is, that it's retention requirements and destroyed properly.
Somebody, you know, can do a FOIA request and we say, well, we don't have any of that. I say, well, I just saw the video of the person writing all that stuff down. Where's the stuff they wrote down?
Or
Technically,
doodled or
Yeah.
drawing
and
pictures and handing it off to another counselor, like. Yeah.
the safest is to not write it down or give it to Sammy. Those are your two safe spots. Okay.
All right, are we ready? No, see here.
Might have been
Okay,
6:15.
I can adjourn this work session at 7:00.